People have described me as a lot of things: outspoken, blunt, difficult, aggressive, different people, different labels. And honestly, I've leaned into it because at some point I figured if that's what they're going to see, I may as well own it. But here's what almost nobody knows about me. When someone raises their voice even slightly, my body goes cold, my mind goes quiet, and something in me just shuts down. And I stand there nodding, saying nothing, while internally I'm trying to remember how to breathe. That's not what aggressive people do. That's truly what scared people do. So, which one is true? Am I the bold, direct, take no nonsense person people think I am? Or am I the person who goes completely blank when someone gets in my face? The answer, and this took me years to figure out, is that both are true. And understanding why both are true changed everything for me. And that's what this video is about. I'm not going to go into the details of where this came from. That's not the story I'm telling today. I'm not sure I even want to share that story. What I will tell you is that at some point in my life earlier than it should have been, I learned that conflict was dangerous. Not uncomfortable, not awkward, dangerous. So my nervous system did what nervous systems do. It built a defense. And the defense looked like this: get loud before anyone gets loud at you. Be the most confident person in the room so nobody questions you. Come in prepared, come in strong, come in like you already own the outcome, because if you do that well enough, maybe nobody will ever see the person underneath who is genuinely terrified of confrontation. Here's the thing about that strategy: it works for a while. People do back off, people do take you seriously, you stop being the easy target, but it costs you something because you're not actually dealing with the fear. You're just dressing it up and hoping nobody notices. And a lot of times, that's where the imposter syndrome comes from. And in professional settings, especially, the cracks start to show in very, very specific ways. Someone in a meeting talks over you, and instead of calmly holding your ground, you either go completely silent or you overcorrect. And then you come out swinging. And neither response is the one you actually wanted. Someone is condescending to you and your face stays neutral, but inside you're either shutting down or furious. And the gap between what you feel and what you're able to say in that moment is huge. Someone mansplains something you are literally the expert on, and you sit there while they finish, and later in the car, you have the most brilliant, devastating response that you will never actually say to anyone. You've had these conversations in your head so many times. Same conversation, different responses. I should have said this. I could have done this. None of which you have done. Does this sound familiar? That was my reality for a long time. And the frustrating part, from the outside, I still look like the confident one. Nobody knew I was going home and replaying those moments for days. So let's begin from the beginning. The very first place most of us learn to use our voice or learn to silence it is in the presence of authority. As children, we are taught explicitly and implicitly that authority must be obeyed, that there are consequences for speaking back or questioning, for taking up too much space. And so we learn to listen because children are meant to be seen, not heard. And we learn to comply, to make ourselves small and agreeable because that is what keeps us safe. What nobody tells you is the cost of that lesson. Because truly it doesn't stay in childhood. That pattern, listen, comply, go quiet, survive, follows you into every room you walk into for the rest of your life. Into classrooms, into relationships, and into boardrooms. And that's where my voice started being shut down. And the pattern continued for almost my entire life. Now I'm going to tell you about a specific moment. It's a tough one. So whenever I relate this story, people go like, huh? And what did you do? Here is that story. I've repeated it multiple times in my training programs about how we are raised and how we can be different. So I was at a client meeting. I was the professional. I was prepared, although I was very young. I was doing my job, and this client, for whatever reason, maybe he was having a bad day, maybe he had a chip on his shoulder, maybe he just saw someone he thought he could get away with it on, threw papers at me across the desk, standing in an office in my face. And I said nothing. I shrank. I actually shut down. Even now, when I think about it, my throat closes. I gathered myself as best as I could. I got out of that office and I cried the entire way back to work, angry and humiliated. And I might add, abusing the entire way, replaying every second of it, seeing it happen. And I still said nothing to anyone who could have done something about it. Maybe they would have, maybe they won't have. I don't know because I never brought it up. Because somewhere in me, the old lesson was still running. Stay quiet. Don't make it worse. You'll be seen as difficult. And that wasn't the only time. Bosses who yelled, rooms where I'd suggest something and watch it get dismissed before I'd even finish the sentence. Being told I was too young or that I didn't understand, or this one is its own kind of violence. Being told I didn't think. Each one of those moments layered on top of each other, and each one confirmed the same thing the first lesson had taught me. Your voice is a risk. Silence is safer. Now, here's something I really want to address because it's real and it's rarely spoken about honestly. Not every woman has this experience, and that matters. There are women who grow up in homes where they are supported, where their opinions are welcomed at the dinner table, where they were raised as individuals, encouraged to push back, to question, to take up space without apology. And that is genuinely wonderful. But sometimes those women, through no fault of their own, don't have the framework to understand what it feels like to have grown up the other way. They haven't felt a microaggression land in their body the way someone does when their whole history has primed them to receive it as a threat. They haven't experienced the specific exhaustion of spending years performing confidence while quietly falling apart. And so there's this additional layer that women like me carry. Not just the original wound, not just the workplace battles, but the judgment, sometimes from the very people you'd expect to understand. And that tells you you're too sensitive, or you're reading too much into it, or you're making it about something it isn't. That judgment itself is its own kind of silencing. And I want to say this clearly. If you have ever been made to feel that your experience is an overreaction, it isn't. You were responding to something real. Your body kept the score even when everyone around you told you the game wasn't happening. And that's where I was. And that's where something had to change. So let me get a little practical here because I know some of you are watching this and you recognize yourself in what I have described. And you want to know, okay, but what do you actually do in that moment? And here's what worked for me. Not theory, not something I read in a book. Things I tested, failed at, refined, tested, and eventually made my own. 1. Name what is happening in your body before you try to respond. When someone is condescending or aggressive, your nervous system fires before your brain does. You will not think clearly in the first five seconds. So stop trying to think. Instead, and this sounds almost too simple, I learned to just notice it. My chest is tight. My mind just goes blank. I'm in a threat response right now. That act of noticing, even silently, interrupts the automatic pattern just enough to give you a window. You don't have to respond immediately. That's not a rule. The urgency you feel is your nervous system talking, not the room. 2. Buy yourself time without looking like you're buying time. A few phrases I genuinely use and still use. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. It sounds thoughtful, buys you about 15 seconds, and it works every time. I want to come back to that. When someone talks over you or derails you, you're not conceding the point, you're flagging it and moving forward. You come back to it, you don't let it disappear. I actually write it down in my notepad because I always have a notepad and pen when I go for meetings or when I used to go for meetings. And I would always have a notepad and pen and I would write down that I needed to get back to it. You can also say, I wasn't finished. 3 words said calmly, not angrily. This one took me the longest to be able to say out loud. It still requires something from me every single time. But the first time I said it calmly, without apology, the shift in that room was immediate. 3. Stop softening things that don't need to be softened. This one was a huge one for me. I had a habit, and I still catch myself doing it, of prefacing everything with an apology or a qualifier like, this might be a silly question, but I could be wrong, but sorry, just to jump in. Every one of those phrases is a signal to the room that you don't fully trust what you're about to say. And people, consciously or not, respond to that very signal you're sending out. So I started removing them. Cold turkey. It felt rude, even to me. It felt presumptuous. It felt like I was taking up space I hadn't been given permission to take. That feeling, that's the work. That discomfort is the gap between who you were trained to be and who you're deciding to become. 4. Learn the difference between a response and a reaction. A reaction is what comes out when your fear is driving. In my case, a reaction looked like going silent and resentful and sometimes very angry, or overcorrecting and coming in too hard, too aggressive. Neither of those was what I actually wanted to say or how I actually wanted to show up. A response is something you choose. It is slower. It is grounded. It might only be one sentence, but it is yours. The way I learned to tell the difference if what I'm about to say is coming from anger or from the need to protect myself, I wait. If what I'm about to say is simply what's true and what needs to be said, I say it. That distinction took me some time to develop, but once you have it, you know it, you can feel it. 5. Debrief yourself, but with compassion, not with punishment. After a meeting or a conversation that was hard, I used to spend hours in my head pulling it apart. I would lie at night on my pillow and think about this conversation and how I could have said this and I could have said this and I could have handled it differently and I should have said this and why didn't I say that? Why did I freeze? Why did I let them do that? That's not reflection. That's actually punishment. And it doesn't make you better. It just makes you more afraid of doing it the next time. What actually helped was asking different questions. What did I do that I wouldn't have done 6 months ago, even if it was small? What was hard and why was it hard? With curiosity, without judgment. And what do I want to do differently next time? One thing that is specific and doable. That's it. That's the debrief. You're not trying to be perfect because perfection is a myth. You're trying to move the needle one conversation at a time. If you've made it this far, I want to say something directly to you. If you are someone who looks confident on the outside and feels completely undone on the inside, you are not a fraud. You are not an imposter. You are someone who adapted. That adaptation kept you safe when you needed it to. And now you're in a season where you get to choose something entirely different. If you are someone who has written off a colleague, a friend, a family member as aggressive or difficult or too much, I want to gently ask you to consider what might be underneath that. Because in my experience, the loudest people in the room are often the ones who learned the hardest lesson about what happens when you are quiet. And if you're the person who goes blank, who freezes, who drives home and has the conversation you should have had, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are having a completely logical response to something that shaped you, and you can reshape it. My son had a poster which I thought was very powerful. It said, hurt people, hurt people. And that did it for me. That when you are hurting yourself, your tendency to be sharp with others or judgmental about others or hurt other people is a natural instinct to hurt before you get hurt. But you cannot live your life operating from that space. And that moment didn't fix everything, but it reminded me that the work is real and the change is real, even when it's slow, even when it's hard. And that's why I made this video. Not because I have it all figured out, but because I spent too long thinking I was the only one who felt that way. And now I know I'm not. And maybe you needed to hear that too. Let me know if you have ever felt frozen in a meeting and hated yourself for it. Let me know of any moment that has caught you off guard. And if this video has resonated, please share it with somebody. It might help. Let's get the word out. The change is possible.